Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs, and welcome to my very first panel. Welcome everybody. So great to have all these wonderful gentlemen here with me this morning, my time, this evening, their time. It's great to have you all. Today's panel, we're going to be having a special discussion where we're going to be talking about artists, so bands or solo artists, where your favorite album by them is a live album. This was when I picked this topic, this was actually a bit of a challenge for me because as things generally go, I'm not a huge connoisseur of the live album. There are very notable exceptions, which we will get to when we're doing the panel, but on the whole, I tend to be more of a studio album kind of guy. I find quite a number of live albums aren't very well recorded, or where they are well recorded, it's because there's massive overdubbing going on in the studio, that sort of thing. So yeah, this was a bit of a challenge for me, and I hope it was a bit of a challenge for my panelists here as well. So what we'll do is we'll go around and we'll each give one album that we feel is our favorite album by that artist that's a live album, and then at the end of the show we'll go around again and talk about any honorable mentions that anybody might have. So what we will do is we will start with Peter Jones. And Peter, thank you very much for being on the program.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Good evening, good morning to my fellow friends and everyone who's watching. This was an extremely difficult challenge. I am an avid lover of live albums. So I could have picked from dozens where the favorite is a live album. I have two that always sit at the top of my list, and I'm going to not include those today. Plug. Because I think they get talked about a lot, which is okay, but I wanted to go to something that maybe doesn't get talked about as much. This album didn't start out being my favorite of this band, even though this was already released. There's been a lot of changes and a lot of different editions and a lot of other things that have come out since that have completely changed my mind about it, and it has easily jumped to the top of my favorite with this band, and that's going to be the Who's Live at Leeds. And nice. The number of permutations that this release has gone through is quite extensive. You know, recorded in what I think is just the absolute prime of the Who's power. From 69 to 70, I've always contended that when they were on, they were the most dangerous, the most powerful, and most amazing band on the planet. Now, they were very unpredictable, and some shows would be epic, some would be train wrecks. But I guess that's the beauty of brilliance and chaos, and all of that once captured can be a pretty miraculous thing. The original version, of course, was just a one album release, and it didn't have a lot of tracks. And then finally, later, the deluxe edition came out, and they're like, oh, hey, by the way, there's all of Tommy and all kinds of other really great stuff on here. And that's when I started to put it together as an entire concert, to just look at it and go, okay. And this was pretty amazing stuff. And albums can be two different things. They can be a snapshot in time that represent an era or a specific tour, or they can be compilations and put together from multiple tours and picked from. I really like it when it's that snapshot that says, this is, no pun intended, who they were right then. And that's one of the things that I love so much about this. The version I love even better than this one is I did do a high-res FLAC download on this, because, and you say, well, what's the diff? That is now put in actual concert running order. So it's different than all of the previous permutations. So it was a change again. So it's the actual concert in concert order. And I can never get enough of this. The power of the band, the sound quality on this. And let's remember here, this was basically recorded in what we would refer to as either a student union or a cafeteria in a university. This isn't Coble Hall or, Hammersmith or anything like this. This is a university student area, and this came out of it. I could only dream of what that must have sounded like live, and how loud and aggressive and perfectly powerful that must have been. I think all of the members of the band, and I won't belate this point, they're just totally on their game. And as a drummer, this is Keith Moon's finest moment, and he is just glorious to listen to. And the louder you play this, the better it sounds, and the more the hairs go up on the back of your neck and your forearms. And this will never get old for me. So my choice is Live at Leeds by The Who, released in May of 1970.
Excellent choice.
Thank you.
And where can people find you, Peter? Just so that my viewers know.
I do not have my own channel, but so many of my fellow friends have been gracious enough to ask me to join them. I've been Peter's Rock Daydream Nation. I've been on Grant's Rock Warehouse, LP Tremors, Ryan's Vinyl Destination, and the Contrarians. So I just play as a free agent and rely on the kindness of others to include me. And hopefully I have something to contribute that makes it worthwhile. So as you have done yourself, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Oh, no, my pleasure. And just so that my viewers know, for all of my panelists here who do have their own channels, there will be links in the description where you can go and subscribe to them all. So I'll throw it over to John. John, what's your pick?
I thought I had my pick ready to go, and then I got thinking, it's like, I don't know, I might want to go with something a little different here. So I'm actually going to go with my different pick, because I'm instead of my first pick. This came out, I think, not much longer after Live at Leeds, but this is one that I've known. Gosh, I think I pretty much grew up with this album. My brother was a fan of this particular band, and he turned me on to them as well. And there is just something, and this CD does not contain the full show. From what I understand, I hear there's a lot more to the show that is out there. Whether or not it's good quality bootlegs of them out there, I don't know. Maybe Peter knows the answer to this, but so it was this. This was going to be a little three-piece band that came out of Ohio. That it would eventually turn into a four-piece shortly after this concert. James Gang, live in concert. This was from this was from where was this? I can't remember where it was. I can't even remember where it was. Now I'm trying to remember where they recorded it. Carnegie Hall.
Carnegie
excellent. Hall. And you have Stop, which opens up the CD. You have their version of Albert King, You're Gonna Need Me. Nice slowed down song. Take a Look Around, another kind of organ driven. Tend My Garden from the Rides Again album, which goes into Ashes, the Rain, and I, which is just such a haunting song, just a beautiful song there. Of course, Walk Away, which was probably their biggest hit at the time. And then they just go into this really long solo driven version of Lost Woman from the Yardbirds. And everybody gets a solo. You get a guitar solo, you get a bass solo, you get a drum solo, and then you even get a weird noises solo, which is the funniest thing you'd ever hear. But I've heard this. I've been listening to this for good 40 plus years. And I got my brother to thank for this one. This is a fantastic live album. I still listen to this a lot today. And I think that's why I eventually went with this one, because my other pick, I don't listen to quite as much, but it was a big favorite of mine in the day. So when we hit back around, I'll talk more about that one. But James
Look
Gang
forward
live
to
in
it.
concert.
Thank you very much. That's not an album I'm familiar with, so it's one I'll definitely have to go and check out.
To me, it was a Joe Walsh, Dale Peters, and Jim Fox shining moment.
Yeah,
That was the three that was in the band yet at that time, and I think Joe Walsh left shortly after this.
yeah.
And then, but yeah, that's pretty solid. Good stuff. And just so your viewers know, my YouTube channel is called My Music Corner.
Yep.
And so I've had just about everybody on except Peter. I haven't had Peter on yet, but I've got a topic for him, and we're gonna get there. And but yeah, it's just been a blast. This has been a blast to be on yours, Bicyclelegs, and I'm glad to be part of this. So thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. And I used to live with someone when I was in my first year of university who was big into the James Gang, and I listened to a fair bit of it back then, but I've just never gotten around to revisiting that band. So it's definitely something I'll have to go and do.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
Sorry.
To me, definitely the Joe Walsh area is probably my favorite era. But yeah, good stuff.
And don't forget the Tommy Bolin era. Bit of a shout out for that.
Yes, this is true.
And I need to make a comment, John Clauser, that I noticed that you had the silver Mobile Fidelity CD of that.
Absolutely.
Very nice.
Yes, I do.
Well played. Well played. I'm sure it sounds great.
It does. It does.
Okay.
When MoFi meant something.
I'm going to throw it over
I
to
bet you, yeah. When it meant
Todd
something.
now. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm going to throw it over to Todd now, and we'll see what his choice is.
Okay, so my choice is Supertramp Paris from
Nice.
1980, and I'm sure that
Wow.
surprises no one. I've yammered on about this on the Contrarians. On my wall up there, you can see above my head, I've got it framed. And so this album came out in 1980. If no one's heard this album, these are the definitive versions of every single one of these songs. Now, this album probably, I'm almost positive that it has overdubs on it. I don't care because it was so well done. The guys that did the concert sound, Peter Henderson and Russell Pope, I believe Russell Pope just passed away a couple of years ago. They did such a remarkable job with this album. And the thing about this album that's so great is everybody knows a lot of Supertramp songs, but the versions of these songs in this album are extremely powerful, and they've got thunder behind them. It's partly the engineering, it's partly the way the venue sounds and the way the drummers play, the way Bob Siebenberg's playing, but they really resonate and they really rock a lot harder than they do on the, in a lot of cases than they do on the studio albums. And I got this album when I was in the 10th grade. And so back then, I used to spend a lot of time with it, and I would, look at all the pictures and try to imagine that I was watching the show. And I was always I always really loved that picture of John Halliwell with the little, quite right. But there's something about this record. Now it's got the added bonus of, it starts out with School, which is the first song on Crime of the Century, which a lot of people think is their best album. And then it ends with Crime of the Century, which is the last song on Crime of the Century. So it starts with the harmonica in School and ends with the harmonica at the end of Crime of the Century. So I heard Crime of the Century after I heard Paris. And I was actually a little bit disappointed in it because I thought that the way it was engineered, that's a beautiful sounding record, but I like this. I think this has a lot more energy and a lot more power. And it has always been my favorite live album. And I had a really hard time with this because I have a lot of favorite live albums, but very few where I could say it was the artist's favorite album for me. So I knew I was going to pick this one. And and now you don't have to sit at home in your room and look at the pictures and imagining you could see the concert, because the concert was released on Blu-ray. I think it's called Live in 79. I should have brought it in here. I've got it in the other room. So now you can watch the concert. But a remarkable job by everybody. It's the cool thing about it is you can see it in the picture right there. you got two keyboardists, and then the saxophone player usually plays the keyboards because there's not that much saxophone, on every single song. So you got this three keyboard assault. And if you like keyboards like me, that's really great. But when Roger Hodgson plays the guitar, it's just stunning. His solos are fantastic, and it's such a clean sound. You can hear every note. So that's my choice, Supertramp Paris.
Excellent. I was going to say, actually, Roger Hodgson, underrated guitar player.
Yeah.
He can really rock.
Yeah, and Rick Davies, underrated piano player.
Yeah.
He hits those grand piano keys so hard. I don't know how he doesn't break the strings.
I wish they'd get back together.
Yeah, me too. Well, I wish
it won't
I would
happen.
have been okay with the later period lineup doing the tour they were supposed to do in 2015, but I don't think Rick Davies' health is up to it. But they've come so close to an actual reunion so many times, and there's always been some kind of contractual thing or some little item that derails it. But yeah, I wish they would do that too.
It's a real head
I think
scratch.
everyone does.
Yeah. No, great choice, and definitely one I'm going to have to go and
Thanks.
pull out and have another listen to after the show. So we'll go with Grant next.
All right.
You don't have your own channel yet, do you?
No,
Todd?
but I was just looking around, and I've been on everyone's channel except for Peter, who doesn't have one. But yeah, I've been on all these channels, and the Contrarians and Rush Bands.
Excellent. Okay, Grant, what's your choice?
All right. Well, I was kind of torn. Like I said, I pulled like 5 different records, but I'm kind of inspired by Peter Jones, because he went with something that he felt that, maybe someone else wouldn't have went with. So I'm going to go back into the archive and go with a live album that I think needs to get more love. And I think it could be considered a defining record in the artist's career. Now, this record came out in 79. It's from the 78 tour, but it's not the complete concert. Now, what's weird about this artist is that there were 2 live albums. One came out in 79 and one came out in 80. Both not complete concerts. So it's sounds more like a money grab to me, but you could put these 2 concerts together if you want, and then you got a whole show. But the thing is, most of this artist catalog, I don't think he had proper. I'm not saying that the records don't sound good. What I'm trying to say, I don't think it represents what the artist sounds like, really. The artist I'm going to go with is Sammy Hagar, and the concert album is All Night Long. Now, if anybody knows this record, it's basically the Montrose Band. You've got Phil Church is on guitar. He wasn't in Montrose, but you've got Gary Phil, guitar player. He wasn't in Montrose, but you got Bill Church, Denny Carmassi, Alan Fitzgerald. This is the damn Montrose Band without Ronnie. Now, Sammy Hagar is more than a competent guitar player, so I don't miss Ronnie because he blends in with the background. But the playing on this, the band is on fire on this record. There are a lot of tracks from like his earlier albums. Plus, this has got I've Done Everything for You, which I think is a power pop classic that Rick Springfield did a version of. I like both versions. Rick didn't do much with I've Done Everything for You that Sammy already didn't do. But this has got a Donovan cover that is well worth the price of admission. And it's 9 minutes of Young Girl Blues. This song is, this band is so good and so tight. And Sammy Hagar can sing the hell out of Young Girl Blues. It is worth the price of admission right there. I give this a solid 5 out of 5 easy, just on that one track. But like I said, this is the Montrose Band. It's well worth hearing. I wish it was the whole show, and I don't know if maybe the whole show will ever come out. I have no idea, but I think it's wonderful. But just to mention, this is the cover. You've probably seen that before. But then, like I said, they put out this 1980 live record too. It's basically the same band, but it's got some more Montrose songs on it, Space Station Number 5 and 20th Century Man, Plain Jane, because this was the Street Machine tour. This is the tour that I actually saw him on when I was a young wee lad. But no one's probably going to talk Sammy Hagar. So Peter Jones, I was inspired to throw this record out to the masses. And that live album, I can listen to it over and over. And I think that band, I think his whole career up to that point, it was the Montrose band backing, but they never really had that power like they do on the live record. So I think this is the record. If you get into early Sammy, I'd look for those live records. That's where I'd start out. But a lot of his stuff's hard to find now anyway, though. A lot of that early Capitol stuff, a little bit hard to get. So there you go. That's my choice. Sammy Hagar. All
Wonderful.
Night Long.
Thank you. And where can people find you?
Grants Rock Warehouse.
Yeah.
And of course, all these gentlemen have been on. All you've been on my show. So.
Oh, it was an honor to be able to be on your show. So I'm looking forward to the next time.
And I know there's a next time, but I couldn't tell you what it is because I can barely keep track.
Yeah.
I'm busy.
No, thank you for that.
But thank you. This was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. No, good fun. I'm going to throw it over to Davey. Davey, it's thank you firstly for staying up so late to be on the show, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what your choice is.
Not at all. Thank you very much for having me. So to kind of paraphrase what a few of the guys have said, a bit difficult because, especially like Todd said, there's a lot of great live albums, but it's not my favorite album by the band. So even though it might be a 5-star classic live album, I like one of the studio albums better. So, for a Live at Leeds, which I do consider a great album, I'm still sitting here going, who's next though? So there's always that in the back of my mind. So I really had to dig deep and go, what am I going to, if I could only have one album by these artists, and that's what I kind of pulled, and narrowed it down. And eventually I was finding more and more, I was getting rid of the classic acts, and it was more modern that I was left with. So the one I'm ultimately going to go with is actually from 2005, and it's Wilco, Kicking Television, live in Chicago.
Cool.
Which, if you know your Wilco, it's just after A Ghost is Born, from 2004. So it's just after the 2 experimental albums of Yankee Hotel Foxtrot and A Ghost is Born. And before their kind of Back to Basics album, a couple of years later, Sky Blue Sky. And it's mostly comprised of songs from those 2 albums, but done in a very, very, very different set. So it's in the hometown of Chicago, and they're getting a massive response. It's wonderfully well mixed, so you get just the right level of the crowd going nuts for the hometown heroes, but not to be annoying at the same time. And the band are joined for the first time by a guitar genius, who's still with them to this day, and Nils Klein, the jazz guitar player, who, when he's with Wilco, plays obviously more in a rock style or country style in the latest record. But even the tracks that are from earlier records on here, like Misunderstood, which is the opener from the album Being There, it's 100 times heavier than the original version from Being There. It's a stomper, it's insanely heavy and intense. This is the period that some people kind of went off them because they drifted away from Americana and started going a little bit more Radiohead. They started incorporating a lot more sonic textures, but being in a live setting, that's not too much of an issue because they do replicate everything, minus a lot of the textures. So it's back to a much more rock driven sound than an electronic driven sound. Jeff Tweedy's never sounded better. It's from a short residency as well. So it is over a couple of nights. So it isn't one show, but it's kind of over 3 nights. And yeah, it's mostly from those couple albums, but you do get a few from, you get Airline to Heaven from Mermaid Avenue Volume 2, their album with Billy Bragg that they made of Woody Guthrie's Lost Poetry that was put to music. So they dig into the obscure well, and you get the title track, Kicking Television, as an outtake from Ghost is Born that they thought would work better as an exclusive live thing. And then when it came out in vinyl a couple of years ago, they added even more tracks on, including Theologian is my favorite Wilco song, but I thought I'd pick the original version because I think picking the later expanded versions can be a bit of a cheat because they can add on fan favorites in retrospect. So the original is still a double, it's still 2 discs, and it's fantastic. One of the best sounding live records I've heard, one of the most atmospheric ones. It really is one to listen to in the dark, just loud as hell on Friday night. So yeah, Wilco Kicking Television, their first album with Nils Klein and their first live records from 2005.
Right.
Wow,
Thanks.
nice.
That's a band I really do need to check out more. I've been I was familiar with the stuff they did with Billy Bragg, but I've never really sort of gone in deeper into their catalog. So it's definitely something I have to go and check out a little further. And where can my viewers find you, Davey?
Cinema Flicks Music Picks. Now we've got that nice tag thing that YouTube are got. They sent about 300 emails saying you can now have a tag. You can. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. You were getting 3 emails a day going, tag. What's your tag? You got tag? So what's a tag? I don't know what that means. It turns out it's just an at. So at Flicks and Picks will take you straight there, which is nice and handy. Flicks and Picks. So yeah, and apart from that, I'm the same. I'll pop up on Grant's channel. Peter and I Mr. Kerr and I just arranged something yesterday, and Mr. Jones will be back on. I've not been myself recently, but once I'm myself again, I'll be rearranging to start our series that we've started because it was only last month, but it feels like 20 years ago. That's what happens at the start of New Year, isn't it? Just like you never know what time it is, but yeah. So.
Hey,
Wonderful.
Davey, what's your favorite Wilco album? Quick. What's your favorite?
Ghost is Born, but probably at this point, I'd say the debut still creeps up. AM, but Ghost is Born is I think their ultimate achievement. But AM, I don't think they've released a bad time. Summer Teeth.
I love that record.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And we'll finish it off this first round with my compatriot from down in Sydney, Mr. Peter Kerr. Peter, what have you got for us?
Thanks for having me on the show. Well, I found this exercise a little bit easy because there were at least 3 acts to me where their live album is their best album, in my opinion. This album came out in 1981. It was very rare. It went straight to #1 in the UK, and it was very rare for a hard rock, heavy metal, or maybe hybrid punk album to debut at #1. And I'm talking about Motorhead, No Sleep to Hammersmith.
Wow. All
This is a fantastic album, and I think it is a perfect document of the primal raw energy of Lemmy and his crew. Do not accept any substitute. Motorhead for me was Lemmy, Fast Eddie Clarke, and Filthy Animal Taylor. They were Motorhead to me. I mean, I've seen Motorhead 3 or 4 times in later lineups. They were good, but nothing is exactly like that lineup. They had the groove, they had the click, they had the raw energy. Motorhead to me were the perfect transitional band between punk and metal. Are they punk? Are they metal? They sort of were universal, that all those fans and those different genres loved them. Not many people say, I don't like Motorhead between those genres, and way influential. I don't know if this album was strictly recorded in the Hammersmith Odeon. Maybe Pete Jones, you might correct me. I think there are a few other venues. It's a collage of different sort of concerts, but it's just, it's got the quintessential version of Ace of Spades. I mean, I don't mind the studio version of Ace of Spades, but I think the live version is just like a wham. You've got the crowd noise, you've got the excitement. And then, it goes into Stay Clean, great version of No Class, and Let's Hear It for the Road Crew. It was produced by Vic Mail, who is very well renowned, did the Animals, Led Zeppelin, Hendrix. It sounds great. but I think it's a perfect document of a band at the peak of their powers, the raw primal energy. And, you know, that's not to say I don't like Motorhead, you know, in the studio, but this just lifted the material up that extra notch. And yeah, to my ears, I think it's my favorite album by a band which happens to be a live album.
Excellent.
And you can catch me on Rock Daydream Nation.
Yep, I've been on there a number of times.
All these lads have been on here, so
yeah,
yep, more to come.
Peter and I just recorded a show earlier this week, which should be coming out in a few days, which will be great. Looking forward to that one. My turn, I guess. As I say, this was difficult for me because I'm not like, there are certain live albums I really, really like, but on the whole, I tend to be more of a studio albums kind of guy. For me, the criteria had to be albums where, for me, the live versions are the definitive versions of the songs. And I had 3 or 4 that were sort of vying for the one I was going to pick. But in the end, I have gone with Under a Blood Red Sky by U2
Excellent.
from 1984, I think it is. And this one, I was lucky enough to be able to pick this up. Red vinyl. Very nice.
Nice.
This was on the War tour. War is a great U2 album, but I always felt like the production on that album was a little soft for them. Like it just, I feel like it smoothed over some of their rougher edges. And I love the rough edges on this album. It's what really makes it for me. Like the version of Gloria on here, to me, the definitive version of that song. Of course, some of these songs were recorded at Red Rocks at the wonderful amphitheater. And of course, they also put out a video of that concert, which is absolutely fabulous and well worth having a look at. To me, this is U2 at the peak of their powers. I mean, they would do some more really good studio albums, but for me live, this is where it was at for me. 11 O'Clock TikTok, one of my favorite U2 songs. And the version on here is absolutely smoking. I Will Follow. I mean, that's a U2 classic, and they do it wonderfully in this show. And then you've got Party Girl, which is like this sort of obscure B-side, which is just them goofing off on stage and having a bit of fun, and it's really enjoyable. There's even the great bit where Edge flops his guitar solo, and then Bono calls him Guitar Hero, which I think is hilarious. And then on side 2, you've got Sunday Bloody Sunday. Again, for me, this is the definitive version of Sunday Bloody Sunday. Absolutely cracking version. The Electrico, great. Always really, really like that song. New Year's Day. I mean, the studio version of New Year's Day is fabulous, but this version just that little bit better for me. And then you've got 40, that, you know, beautiful song to end concerts with, you know, and then you have the crowd singing along at the end, even as the band have left the stage. Just beautiful. It's a short album. It's only got 8 songs. It's only about 35 minutes long, but it's just absolutely a terrific live album. And for me, when I'm looking to listen to U2, I grab this one as much as I grab any of their studio albums. So that's why I'm going with that one.
Excellent.
Yeah, can't argue with that one.
Yeah. So we'll go around, and if anybody's got any honorable mentions, we'll start again with Peter Jones. Did you have any other albums that you wanted to quickly give a shout out to?
Yeah, I will. And everybody's picks are excellent and some great stuff to learn into. To answer John and Peter's, I don't know if there's extended versions or what the source was on Hammersmith. So both of those will be things that I will be investigating when we're done. As I said, I mean, my first two picks would have naturally been, anybody who knows me would have been Kiss Alive or Made in Japan. I just concede to the court that those are always going to sit as my favorite, both not only favorite live albums, but clearly my favorite albums from each of those bands. I just want to mention one thing about my Who pick, the thing that you were talking about dialogue and when Bono was talking about the Edge. One of my favorite moments in Live at Leeds is when when Peter is introducing Young Man Blues and he talks about Mose Allison. And he said, well, he's been described as a jazz sage. And he says, I don't know what that means. And Keith Moon in the back, he goes, it's a flavor of chicken. And I'm like,
yes.
Absolutely
Mose-
bloody love that.
Mose Allison Sings, highly recommended CD
Yeah.
or record. Mose
so-
Allison Sings.
Yeah, real quick, my other ones here, and these could easily be a higher pick. I've got to go with Bob Seger in his Live Bullet from '76. Clearly the definitive Bob Seger for me, right on the edge, right before all the big hits and everything came. And I love those, but there is a rawness and a real genuine deep love of rock and roll that's going on here about a band that's just about ready to go over the top of the roller coaster. Also Affinity, he's a Michigan guy, and my dad was from Detroit and I was born in Michigan, and his manager's office used to be across the street from my grandparents' house. So they used to see the limos come up all the time back in the day, and they'd have their fur coats on. And if it was nice out, my parents were on the porch and they would always say, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, how are you? Well, all the bigwigs for Bob's crew went into their legal office. So this to me is just unlimited power and energy. And the songs, obviously the version of Turn the Page on here is epic, but Bo Diddley, I've Been Working, Traveling Man, Catmandu, powerhouse. And my last one is maybe a little contrarian for this band. And I'm going to show this cover first because most don't know that one. That's the Japanese only version of Tokyo Tapes by the Scorpions.
Wow.
And a lot of people love Drive, Blackout, Love at First Sting. My favorite era is Uli. And as Bicycle said, the criteria nails this perfectly because these are the definitive versions of those Uli period songs. I love the rawness of it. The low end and the power from Herman's drums are amazing, and just some of the best guitar playing. And I can listen to this forever. This is clearly my go-to if I can only have one Scorpions record. So those are my honorable mentions.
Wonderful.
Very
Thank
good.
you, Peter.
Oh,
John,
thank you.
any honorable
Oh,
mentions?
and I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
Dave, I didn't mean to leave out our connection when I was listing who I'd been with, but like Bond, we will return.
And he's in a frozen moment.
I was going to say you frozen.
Yeah.
It's like,
I froze him up.
Oh,
I don't know what to say. I'm speechless.
Well, at least I'm not wearing a tie.
I don't know if anybody saw that, but I logged in to do the episode with Peter to start our James Bond series. And it subsequently took ill and wasn't great timing, but I logged in and there's Peter wearing an absolutely gorgeous three-piece suit because we're covering James Bond. He looked,
That's right.
looked like Sean Connery at his snazziest, may I say. Just walked off a Savile Row or something. There's me wearing a beanie and a t-shirt.
shaken, not stirred. Oh boy.
John, what are your
So,
honorable
my couple.
mentions?
So I had two that I could have picked here, and these also kind of are albums that I kind of was introduced to in my teenage years by a cousin of mine. Actually had these. So the first one, I find that I like this album quite a bit by this artist because while I have some of this person's studio output, not all of those studio albums are really all that good. And some of the better songs wind up being on this particular live album. because the rest of it's just kind of filler and so I'm just going to apologize ahead of time, for anybody who might not like what a lot of this guy has to say, but I'm sorry, Double Live Gonzo is just ridiculous. I just love this album to death. I've loved it when I was a teenager, and I recently picked it up again because I hadn't listened to it in a long time. And I listened through this again, and I'm just like, man, that is just some raw energy that Uncle Ted's bringing on the guitar and the band. I mean, that was just, you talk about I don't think I ever need to hear anybody else do Baby Please Don't Go again. I first heard it from Ted, and that's probably my favorite version of that song. Of course, all the other classics, the Cat Scratch Fever, the Stranglehold, Motor City Madhouse, Hibernation, Great White Buffalo. And of course, you can't forget the classics that everybody wants to sing, Yank Me, Crank Me, But Don't Wake Up to Thank Me, and Wang Dang Sweet Poontang, because everybody wants to sing those songs. Anyway,
Right.
I still love this album. I think it's really good. I like that period of Ted Nugent. And then I think another one that I could have picked, and again, my cousin introduced me to this, and I can't really say I've ever been a big fan of the band's studio output, and I've never taken the time to listen to it. But because I live in Alabama, I feel like I hear it all the time. Yeah, One More from the Road. So, I mean, come on. The introduction for Working for MCA just kicks it right off. Great set. But yeah, I live in Alabama. I don't need to hear Sweet Home Alabama ever again. Please. No. That's my picks.
Two
Wonderful.
great
Good
albums.
picks.
Killer albums.
Todd, did you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah, this was the only other one that I could think of that was my favorite album for an artist. It's a live album, but it would be Dire Straits' Live Alchemy. It's funny, when this came out, it was kind of touted as like an audiophile recording, and it's a very good recording. It has some issues. You can hear the amplifiers buzzing during the quiet parts and stuff like that, but a very good sounding set. I wish I still had it on vinyl. I don't. One of the best versions of Romeo and Juliet that they've ever done, and the great thing about it is that that song is embellished, and there are some parts added to it. And that song continued to evolve. I mean, even on their last live album, On the Night, there's a even more elaborate version of Romeo and Juliet. So I love that. I love that it ends with Going Home, theme from Local Hero. It's always been one of my favorites. And if I had to pick
it's a beautiful
Dire
track.
Straits.
It's gorgeous.
Mhm.
And a killer version of Telegraph Road. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh,
killer.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. But there's, in doing this, I kind of came up with a lot of bands, and I thought, well, like Rush has like 6, 7, 8 live albums, something like that, and I love all of them. But it wouldn't be none of them would be my favorite Rush albums. But I thought of this one, and this one comes really close. And this is Joe Jackson live in New York, Summer in the City, and they're just a trio, and it's Joe Jackson and my favorite Joe bass player Graham Maybe, and my favorite Joe drummer Gary Burke, and just really interesting arrangements arranged down to a trio. Lots of piano. There's some jazz standards. There's a Beatles cover. There's a Steely Dan cover. And so, yeah, that would be probably the one that's closest to, not quite my favorite album, but maybe on a particular day it could be.
Yeah,
Good pick.
Joe Jackson, he live. What I love about
They're all
him,
good. Yeah.
What I love about him is he was constantly reinventing the arrangements for his songs. He wouldn't just play the bog standard, as it is on the vinyl, on the studio version arrangements. He would always do completely different arrangements to suit the band he happened to be playing with at the time.
That 86 album, I don't like the whole album as much as I like this one, but that version of a slow song is one of my favorite recordings of all time. That live
and I
version.
love the on there. You've got 3 different versions of Is She Really Going Out With Him, and I love the a cappella one.
And none of them are like the
gorgeous.
original.
No, exactly.
Yep.
Grant, what are your
Great.
honorable mentions?
All right, I'm gonna, okay, I've got three, I'll make it quick. But John Clauser, you inspired me once again, much like Peter Jones did, but your description for Double Live Gonzo was perfect. And I thought you were going to display a different record than what you did. I thought you were talking about Peter Frampton, Frampton Comes Alive, because if you listen to Peter Frampton's output prior to this, there's a lot of great tracks. Don't get me wrong. I like those records, but there's something missing. And when he does them live with his band, that's just all over it. It brings all the songs to life. And as far as guitar playing, Peter Frampton is the man. I saw Peter Frampton like 5 years ago live, and he still was bringing it. This is a great record. In fact, this is the deluxe edition. So this is like the whole show, I think. Highly recommended. Pick that up. The other one is a no-brainer. This is considered one of the all-time greatest live albums ever. But if you think about what came before it, I mean, the stuff that was in the studio was fine. It was, it's good, but it's not like it is on Live at the Fillmore East. I mean, this is where everything comes through. And just for show and tell, here's the original pink Capricorn.
Oh,
If you
cool.
find this, you want the pink Capricorn because those sound great. But everybody knows this record. Hot Lana, I mean, Statesboro Blues. But these are the definite versions. And no one can argue that these are the definite versions of these Allman Brothers tracks. The other one I want to talk about is, well, I'd have to say these are definite versions too, because before this, the singer was in the band on the second album. He got fired. He came back in 1976. And then they put out REO Speedwagon live. You get what you play for. So, this is the live album. It's got Kevin Cronin back. And compared to what came before, these are the definite versions of all those early tracks. Got Music Man, Golden Country's on here, and they still play that on the radio. Heck, I don't know. Like You Do, Lay It Down, Keep Pushing's on here. So, this was right after he came back. Whether you like REO or not, this does qualify as the quintessential REO album up to this point. So there's all my 4 picks, and thanks for having me again, Bicycle Legs. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, I've really enjoyed it. And REO Speedwagon, I must check out their 70s stuff, because I came into them with the, early 80s power ballads and all that. And I quite liked those songs, but
I don't have a problem with them.
I've always been intrigued by what their 70s stuff was like, because I know it's completely different from that.
It is.
I definitely need to check that out.
Get this one, then.
I'll have a
Bicycle
look and
Legs.
see if I can find it. Yeah. Davey, did you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah, so there was a few that I tossed aside because I realized I only like maybe the expanded version, or not that I only like, but the one I go to is the expanded version, which is a bit of a cop-out. So it wasn't the one that was released at the time. So I considered like Johnny Cash live at Folsom. But I only listened to the full version where you get the whole concert, because you get the set by Carl Perkins, you get all the Johnny Cash stuff, you get the Carter sisters. I considered Band of Gypsies, but again, I tend to listen to that box set that came out a few years ago, where you get the full weekend's worth of tapings, and it just blows the original out of the water. So I tried to pick only ones that the original album either hasn't been improved upon or I'm content with. So my honorables would be, to stay in a more modern one, the last thing they ever released, actually, the White Stripes, Under Great Northern Lights. It's the last thing they actually put out, and to me, it's their best. Blows all the studio albums out of the water. It takes the Celtic direction we're going for with the bagpipes and everything, and still adds it on top of the bluesy stuff from the early days and the guitar rock and the garage stuff, which is a wonderful juxtaposition. And to me, it's the best thing that Jack White did under this under this banner, and there's no reason for them to get back together because that's as far as they could take it. I did mention ones that have been expanded. This has been, but I'm perfectly content with the original as it was. Humble Pie, Rockin' the Fillmore performance. I think this is a perfect live album. And yeah, there's the big box set where you get 25 extra tracks and you can hear all the songs that they didn't do, but I like the ones that they do here perfectly well. Thank you very much. Yeah, not everything needs to be an 8-discer. And this one is maybe a little bit controversial, but I'll explain the rationale behind it. 4-Way Street, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And the reason for that is because I consider Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young to be a separate band from Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Yeah.
Because the minute you add Neil Young, it's a completely different dynamic. And also he tended to record his tracks completely separate anyway. I mean, Country Girl and Helpless sound like nothing else on Deja Vu for a reason, because they're pretty much Neil solo tracks that have been tacked on there. So to me, CSNYs have only done Deja Vu, American Dream, and Looking For. They've only done 3 studio albums.
Yeah.
So this by default is better than any of them, because you get their solo stuff as well. You get like Graham Nash doing King Midas in reverse is best than he did with the Hollies. You get some amazing David Crosby stuff in here. So, you know, the Lee Shore and Triads. You get a ridiculously fantastic heavy 12-minute long version of Carry On. And Neil does a great medley, an acoustic medley of The Loner, Cinnamon Girl and Down by the River. Which is sensational. So yeah, this was a double on LP. And yeah, phenomenal stuff. So for CSNY, this is my favorite album. So yeah, thank you.
Great choice. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great choice.
Mr. Kerr, any honorable mentions for you?
Yeah, I've got a couple. This one is probably it's voted as one of the greatest metal live albums of all time. And I have to agree. And it was a bit of a toss-up between this one and the Motorhead. And I'm talking about UFO, Strangers in the Night.
Yeah.
This is the album I go to when I want to hear the quintessential versions of the UFO songs, because I find some of the UFO albums a little bit flat and it doesn't have that spark. And UFO as a band with Michael Schenker were getting better and better and better. And it's really disappointing that they didn't go on with it, because this album absolutely shows the promise that outfit had. It's full of danger, full of energy. You know, there's some imperfections in it, but it makes it a totally organic and authentic live experience. And I think it's one of the great live albums, and it's the one that I always go to in respect of UFO. And Schenker's playing is absolutely on fire. I mean, it's the most inspired decision that they picked up this 18-year-old guitarist from Germany, and the band lifted from a band that was basically a 3rd division to a band that was just on the cusp of 1st division. So, fantastic. Another one I was going to go with is the Ramones. Now, everyone's familiar with It's Alive. I'm going to go with a Record Store Day release, which is called It's Alive 2. So It's Alive was done at the Rainbow Theatre on New Year's Eve, 1977. This one was done a couple of days earlier, and it's still a killer version. And it's got all the, you've got Joey, Johnny, DD and Tommy doing the first 3 or 4 albums. And the versions of the songs are great. And, you don't really need to go to a Ramones album. It's all there. Not to say the Ramone albums weren't of high quality. I find that the Ramones were kind of at a plateau, but at such a high quality. And this album was just that one notch above. And it's just 60 minutes, no guitar solos, all killer, no filler. It's like a freight train, and it's highly enjoyable. So look, It's Alive 1 or It's Alive 2, you can't go wrong. And this is the quintessential sort of tap in if you want to go into the Ramones catalog.
Yeah.
Ramones, It's Alive 2.
And the thing about Ramones live was that the songs were so much faster live.
Phonetic.
Yeah, just incredible. They'd play these songs in 90 seconds,
Yeah.
And
the show-
you would get, and there was no sort of, chat between the songs. It was just Dee Dee with it. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
In
Not
they
a
go.
second wasted. Not a second wasted.
Yeah. Well, I had a few honorable mentions. A couple of them I've talked about before on the Contrarians when we did a live show, so I won't go into too much detail, but one of them is Live After Death by Iron Maiden. This was my ticket into the band. My little sister was a massive metalhead as a teenager when I was sort of more listening to sort of new wave and prog and that sort of thing. And this album she used to play to death, and I used to absolutely love it. And it was really my entryway into the band. So that's why it still holds a really sort of high place for me. And I still, if I really am sort of looking to scratch that Iron Maiden itch, it's the album I'll tend to go to more than any of the others. Although those first 7 albums are just, fabulous.
I saw that tour and that was just amazing. I was a young teenager. That was the tour I saw Iron Maiden on. It was just fantastic.
That would have been incredible. Yeah. Another band that I think are a quintessentially a live band, even though their studio albums are just absolutely fabulous. Looking to rep an Australian band, and that is Screamin' Blue by Midnight Oil. Although it's only a single disc on vinyl, this thing is nearly an hour long. The grooves are quite crammed, but it still sounds good on vinyl. So it's a really good pressing, surprisingly enough. For me, most of these are the quintessential versions of these songs because, the Oils were a live band. And, I was lucky enough to get to see them live. I know Peter Kerr's seen them live a number of times, including their very final concert. They were a band where you can, even on a record, you can sort of almost hear the sweat dripping off Peter Garrett as he's up there on stage. And this is an absolutely live album too. There's no overdubs on this, to the point where in the song Brave Faces, you can actually hear Peter Garrett drop the microphone at one stage. So no touching up there. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is an interesting live album because it's a live album where none of the tracks were on any of this artist's studio albums. So it's almost like a studio album, but all recorded live. And that is Running on Empty by Jackson Browne. And this is a real document of a live tour because these songs aren't just recorded on stage. Some of them are recorded backstage. Some of them are recorded in hotel rooms. One of them's even recorded on the bus while they're driving. Just a fabulous, fabulous live album. And he does some cover versions as well as doing songs that he co-wrote with some other people. The title track's obviously one of his best known songs, but the song The Road, which is a cover by a guy called Danny O'Keefe, beautiful, beautiful song. And they started off with a version that's recorded in a hotel room, and then they segue into a version that's recorded live on stage in front of an audience. Just fabulous. Probably my favorite Jackson Browne album. This one was a bit touch and go, but it's definitely right up there as far as the Jackson Browne catalog for me. So there you go. Those are my honorable mentions. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on this show. It's been an absolute honor to have you all on. For my viewers, as I said at the beginning, links in the description for everybody's channels. So you can go and subscribe to them if you're not already. I suspect that a fair few of my viewers are already subscribed to these various channels anyway. But if you're not, links in the description. Please go and subscribe to all these gentlemen's channels because they are all absolutely fabulous. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. Everything's playlisted. So if you want to go and look at my studio albums ranked shows, there's a playlist for those. If you want to look at my Bicycle Legs Discovers Rush series, playlist for those. If you want to look at my In Defense of videos, there's a playlist for those, and so on and so on. If you want to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at bicyclelegs. On Instagram, I'm mostly posting the records I happen to have picked up or that I'm listening to at the time, as well as posting channel updates. On Twitter, I talk about anything and everything, but I am definitely trying to give that more of a music focus. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.